because the sun is coming from this direction. It's the iPhone's dynamic range is perfect to capture everything that's here. So we're gonna actually try shooting against the sun. And that's it, and we're just gonna go for a walk and see what we can find. Hey everyone, I hope that you're doing well. Welcome to another video. Today's video is all about the iPhone and how the iPhone has been a part of my photographic journey from very, very early on. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to talk about my journey as a photographer right from when I started in digital photography in 2010 all the way up until now. So currently it is January 2020 at the time of this recording. And I think it's a perfect time. It's very fitting. And so I'm going to share with you different stages, different phases, different subgenres of photography that I've embarked upon and how the iPhone has helped me, become a better photographer. I can honestly tell you that I've learned more lessons shooting with the iPhone than any other combination. And that's not to say that I've only learned from the iPhone, but shooting with the iPhone has really, really challenged me, mainly because it has limitations. And I'm a big believer that sometimes giving ourselves limitations, rather than looking for better gear that's gonna make it easier for us, sometimes learning to overcome the limitations that we have in our lives make us better at whatever we're trying to achieve. The iPhone has been with me right from the very, very beginning. In 2009, my grandparents passed away, and I remember being at the funeral and looking at the slideshow and thinking, wow, I understand now the value of a photograph. A good photograph, the value increases with time. And so I decided that I would become a photographer. And I became obsessed. And thus the first stage that I want to share with you, the hunger stage, right? I was so hungry to become a good photographer. So I just would shoot anything. It didn't matter what it was. Every day I had to shoot something. And if I would look at something and I would think like, oh, look at that, I would shoot it. Cars, shapes, statues, it didn't matter what it was. And so I'm going to share pictures from this phase in my photography. I'm not sharing today's pictures because I think it's my best work. I'm sharing them with you so that you can see what my journey has been like. In 2013, I started to give myself what I called one-day assignments. I had, heard a lot of podcast interviews with photographers that I really admired. I had seen interviews on YouTube of photojournalists. One of the things that they would talk about is they would talk about assignments. They would talk about how magazines and newspapers used to give them assignments where they would go to a country for 3 to 6 months, and how they would do these long-term assignments. And I remember thinking like, wow, I would like to do that. So I started to give myself one-day assignments because I couldn't afford to leave for 3 to 6 months. And so in 2013, I don't even remember how I found it. I found out that at the Pomona Fairgrounds, they were going to have an Irish festival for St. Patrick's Day. And I showed up and I had my iPhone with me. I ended up shooting the entire day with my iPhone 4. And so on that day, I don't know why, but something clicked when it came to composition. And so here are some pictures from that day. So after doing this one-day self-assignment, I began to do this over and over and over. And so on Saturdays, I would go out and shoot. At a certain point, I began wondering if the pictures that I found interesting were only interesting because the people in the pictures were interesting. I decided that I would do a one-day assignment without people in them. So I assigned myself to go to Malibu. That was the first time that I tried it. And I thought, can I document my journey to Malibu without taking pictures of people and still make photographs that are interesting? And here are some of my pictures from that day.
I stand by you when you're falling, when the river is calling. I said I love you forever. We can make it together. What goes up must come down. There's lots of friendly faces all around, and nothing's ever lifting me higher than a touch of your sweet desire. What we're all built in right.
Low light and action photography. This is a genre of photography that has been really important to me, primarily because for the last decade I've been working as a singer and as a dance teacher in different nightclubs and bars all over town. And so documenting that aspect of my life was very important to me. So most of the pictures that I'm going to share with you now, these are pictures that I took with the iPhone 4 and the iPhone 5. Learning to get past the limitations that the iPhone had in low light photography allowed me to develop skills that I later on would go on to transfer into shooting with mirrorless bodies. And so here are some of the pictures. Once again, it's not my best work, but these are just some snapshots that I took with my iPhone, trying to use the limitations as an advantage. this is an area of photography that I'm really passionate about. And if you follow my Instagram, you can see that I'm constantly doing portraits, constantly trying different things. And I have to say that the influence that the iPhone has had on my portraiture has been quite profound. For the most part, in the last 10 years, I did not own a wide-angle lens. I think the widest lens that I would shoot, or the widest focal length, was a 50mm. And so when I started to shoot with the iPhone and I started to try to make portraits with the iPhone, it forced me to shoot from a completely different perspective. It forced me to try and do different things like silhouettes, environmental portraits, things of that nature. Most of the pictures that you're going to see now, these are pictures that I took with the standard lens on the iPhone, which is an equivalent of about a 28mm as far as I'm aware, which is a lot wider than the 50mm focal length. And so most of the pictures you're going to see were way before portrait mode existed. And then towards the end of this slideshow, I'll show you a couple of pictures that I was able to make with the portrait mode. So yeah, I hope you enjoy. At this point, I have shared with you a couple of different phases, a couple of different subgenres of photography where the iPhone has been instrumental in helping me grow. What I'd like to do now is I'd like to kind of start piecing them together and connecting the dots in a visual way. So a couple of years ago, about maybe 2 years ago, I bought an iPhone 8 Plus, and it was the first phone that had the portrait mode and that I had ever owned. I got contacted by a brand called Ogasso Outdoors, and what they do is they restore old Broncos and they fix them up, and it's amazing the work they do. And so when they reached out to me, they wanted me to document a day, kind of like a road trip camping on the beach type of theme. And so I jumped on it. Right around that time, coincidentally, Instagram had also implemented Instagram stories. And so, I had this new iPhone and I wanted to test it out. And so I thought, well, I'm going to take a lot of pictures with the iPhone. So I'm going to share with you some pictures of this day so that you can see how all of the different phases that I've shared with you, shooting in low light, portraiture, one-day assignments, whether it be places or people, or just even in the hunger phase, just shooting things in cars. And I want to share with you this next segment so that you can see how all of those phases, even though they seem random and maybe unproductive at the time, to me that's how they felt, they started to come together to allow me to be a more well-rounded photographer so that I could shoot better. And so here are some pictures from that day. Okay, so if you're still watching this video, thank you so much for sticking around. I have one more segment to share with you. And this is a genre that I'm really passionate about and that I associate more with the coming decade more than I do with the previous one, and that is travel photography. So I've always wanted to do travel photography, and I started to travel in 2015. I decided that I would take one trip a year at least. And so I'm going to share with you some pictures that I took with the iPhone. When I first started traveling, I didn't know what I was doing. I felt like I wasn't going to document my trip very well. But I always had my phone with me, and I just reverted to what I knew. And once again, going back to that concept of connecting the dots, I would give myself one-day assignments, and sometimes I would give myself a one-day assignment 3 days in a row at the same place to try to capture what I needed. And I would shoot cars, and I would just kind of go into that hunger phase and shoot portraits. So anyways, I'm going to share with you some of the travel pictures that I've been able to make with the iPhone. Hopefully you can see how the dots are connecting and how the iPhone has been instrumental in allowing me to develop these different skill sets. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video. Thank you. Bye.